Happy day, Amber. How are you?
I'm well. How are you, Martin?
I'm doing great. Um, so this is a continuation from a conversation we had off mic.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Oftentimes, I have to just tell the listeners, this is so funny. Oftentimes, before I start to speak, I will say, "You're not recording this, right, Martin?" So I hope it's not one of those
No, true
conversations.
story, true story, for the listeners. Frequently, I'm like, "Should I press record?"
No, and
And
I'm often like, "No, don't record this. I don't want to be." The hard part is it's that accountability,
yeah,
right? Because I know I'm feisty. I live in feistiness.
yes. No, I get it. I've
And I welcome the feedback, but I also know I'm human and critical feedback and also people that don't agree with me, like, I get it. It's hard work. But I'm okay to stand
no, it's all good.
on what I say.
Honestly, we would have gold if we just had that. But I will say I saw Bear Grylls on an interview recently, and they talked about something he wanted left off air, and so they turned the one camera off beside him, but then he looked over at the end, and two other cameras were on,
Oh,
and I thought,
no.
no,
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 that's not fair.
that's not integrity. That's
Yeah.
not integrity. We can't do that.
Okay, so
So
this is still gonna be
so it's still
integrity?
going to be we're in integrity,
Okay.
but what I wanted to talk to you about, we were literally just having a conversation the other day about 13 years ago. And it was very specifically 13 years ago because we were talking about where our children were
Mhm,
in their journey compared to today,
mhm,
and then who we were in terms of our life and what we knew.
mhm.
And it's almost exactly 13 years ago when I'm about to graduate my first coaching course.
'Kay.
And I'm pretty sure you were well into your master's at that point.
I wasn't. I hadn't
Okay.
even started
You
it
hadn't
yet.
even started it yet.
Hadn't.
Okay. That just takes us back. Yeah.
Yeah.
But what we were talking about was the environment in which we were finding ourselves,
Mhm,
which was we met because we were part of
mhm.
a religious organization
Yeah, at the time.
at that time. And that organization, like, there were so many things when I think back 13 years ago
Mhm.
that I look over at you and I see, oh my God, with or without training, event planning.
Yeah.
Your event planning was like, whether you had project management skills or not, your event planning was just off the charts.
Yes.
The other things you were doing there were off the charts.
Yes.
What do you think was naturally a part of you 13 years ago that led you to where you sit to today?
Well, I've often, when I'm asked about project management as like a profession and why I now kind of I'm so dedicated to the profession of project management, it really is because project management was a huge part of me um, being able to recognize what my gifts and skills amounted to in the marketplace. So 13 years ago, I agree with you. I was essentially um, a program manager, a portfolio manager, and an event planner. I worked with hundreds and hundreds of volunteers, and I was not an employer as much as I was a volunteer coordinator because the environment that I was in, I didn't have staff that worked under me. I did. I had a couple of staff that worked under me, but technically, I ran all of these grand events and these programs and portfolios with volunteers. And when I say with volunteers, like one event in particular I am thinking about that we ran every October. It was always centered around Halloween. We were looking at, between 500 and 1,000 attendees. And that I say that number 500 to 1,000 because that event we ran every October for years. So in the beginning, it was smaller and then it grew. And I think the last few times we ran it, there were over 1,000 attendees at that event. But the entire event was managed and orchestrated by me, two part-time staff members, and then on average 60 volunteers. And those volunteers were essentially doing jobs. They were unpaid, but they were facilitating and running and managing and doing jobs, of which you, my friend, were one of those volunteers. So that's how our relationship and our connection, to each other, even professionally started. Um, interestingly enough, and I don't think we've ever talked about this in the first season or in this season of the podcast, but you have never worked for me and I have never worked for you. We have never been employed for or with each other. It has always been in volunteering. And even to this day, you and I, we are volunteering our time to work together, to build this podcast, to have these conversations. It's always been in this volunteering mode. So even though we say we're colleagues, technically in the world of business and work, we're not, because we don't work together and earn money together. We had a brief couple of projects that we worked on where there was an exchange of money, but even then, it wasn't employer employee, nothing. So project management was a profession that I didn't know existed 13 years. Well, I did know 13 years ago, but 15 years ago, I didn't know that there was a profession of project management. But all of this work that I had been doing, I was like, who am I? And it was probably about 13 years ago where I started in earnest to research, what is it that I am? What is it that I do? What professions, what trainings, what sort of certifications or education could I have, or should I, or ought to I have had in order to be capable of what I do? And man, the first major thing that popped up in my research at the time, 13 years ago, is project management. So I enrolled in a online project management fundamentals course. And I started learning about the profession of project management. And I did this completely under the radar. You didn't even know. We were friends then. I mean, I was definitely volunteer manager. You were one of my volunteers, but we were beginning a real genuine
Oh, yeah.
friendship. Our families were connected. Our kids were similar aged. Our partners knew each other. But you didn't know that I was going to school for project management. I hid it from everyone because I was in that curiosity or exploration stage. I also personally was not doing well. I was disillusioned. I was feeling disconnected. I had been working in the role that I had at the time for almost a decade by then. And I wasn't feeling that I aligned. And if you read my newsletters and you've heard other conversations, you'll know my journey was I was working for a religious organization at the time. And that religious organization required me to agree wholeheartedly with their religious doctrine. And part of why I was so disillusioned was that I didn't. I didn't believe in it. I didn't agree to it anymore. I didn't believe in it. I don't know if I ever really did, but in the beginning when you get hired, you don't question it. You're just like, "Oh, I got the job and my heart and my passion aligned." But when they, when the rubber met the road, they were really looking for me to agree to everything, and I couldn't anymore. So I think I started training in project management because I was like, I got to get out of here. um, and that was 13 years ago. And yeah, my family and my time and my presence. I was coming into, I think, a crisis season for my professional career, and project management saved me from that. No doubt, no question. It reverse engineered this capability. I was a program portfolio manager and a project manager most of my career. When I look back right to in my 20s, even in my late teens, it's all I've ever done is manage projects, and never one project, always six at the same time, because you have to. Just the volunteer portfolio part of managing a massive event when you don't have any staff to tell people what to do, you just have volunteers, which means you have to inspire and motivate and relate and create human connection. And then, that alone is just a project, let alone what you're also trying to accomplish. So, and then you also know, and most of the listeners know, I also started as a chef early on. I began kind of chefing in my late teens, and then was a pastry chef and did lots of food. Then I had my own cooking school for, oh gosh, 15 years. So I was always epic event that included me physically from scratch cooking all the food and then presenting that and then integrating that with the experience that went around it. So projects were my life, but I didn't know about the profession. And so now, fast forward 13 years later, yeah, I've done a lot of training, but the training was to legitimize
Mm.
my experience. And when people say, how long you've been a project manager, I can't say, well, I got my PMP in 2015, 2016, and say, oh, I've only been a project manager for 10 years. No, I've been doing this my whole life. I just, that many years ago, recognized it and then trained and certified in it because it really helped reverse engineer. It also helped me make the departure from my religious affiliation. And that was very difficult. That's a personal departure journey that came with a lot of pain and a lot of strife. But as it relates to, 13 years ago, that's where I was at. And project management, like I said, it gets a gold star for helping me on my journey, on my professional journey. That's also why I'm so dedicated to the practice and the profession of project management today, because for the last 13 years, it has so helped me understand who I am, understand what my capabilities are, and also it helped me find my tribe. And that's a tribe of other dedicated professionals. And you know what? My story isn't unique in the project management field. I was in Phoenix at PMI's Global Summit in November of 2025. And when you're in those rooms with thousands of professional project managers and you're having this conversation, there's a lot of us who found the profession long after we already had the role. And I think as I teach it today in the courses that I teach in project management, I really believe if you are human, you are a project manager. There is something very intrinsic to our species as being project managers. I think we're project driven. At the same time, being in the profession is different than, writing yourself a grocery list when you go shopping. Technically, that's a project, but knowing and understanding the tools, the techniques, and the artifacts that we apply in a professional setting, that's a level up. And I understand that. But I don't think it helps us to elevate ourselves as project managers to this level that, other people, you could never understand what I do. I'm like, yeah, you can. You can get it.
Well, it's funny you say that because I'm thinking about those early days
Mhm.
and the October. So that October event, if you really just
Oh,
kind of
yeah,
want
yeah,
to put
yeah.
it out,
No, let's go there. We can go there if you want.
just like you had multiple rooms. So let's just talk about setup in multiple
Scope?
spaces.
We can talk about scope, yeah.
Okay. We had multiple types of volunteer because
Yes.
we were running a kitchen.
Yep.
So part of it had food,
Yes.
food prep, food
Yes.
cooking, food delivery,
Right.
cleanup.
Yeah.
That's just the food section. And then we had events, and there was multiple events, and there were age-related events.
Correct.
So if you're looking at all of that,
Mhm.
like you said, there's a good 100 of us on any given time, and you were the conductor of the orchestra.
I definitely was.
You
Yeah.
everyone was like, "Well, what do we do? Ask Amber." And it was
Yeah.
true. It was a
And I had the answers.
and you had the answer
because I saw it all in my mind.
you had a perfect picture.
Right.
You were like director of a big movie.
Yeah, you're right.
You were making Star Wars, and
That's
you
right.
knew why is the robot just the robot's over there? Trust me, it'll work later.
Yeah.
And when it came to that, and I just want to speak a little bit from my own experience, you didn't come to me and go like, Martin, I understand you're doing this, and this professional. No, what you did was you put out need.
Yeah.
Hey, I need people to be in the kitchen, and I need people to take pictures.
Yeah.
And the crazy spot was, we didn't talk about this, but I paid for college by being a dishwasher,
Mm.
and I paid for college by taking wedding photos on the weekend because I had a friend who did this
So you were well primed for both those
And
volunteer
so when you
roles.
said I needed someone in the kitchen to do dishes, I was
Right.
like, man, I can do dishes like nobody. Like it was artistry. I used to do it with a sense of artistry, and now I can do it for this 1,000 people.
Right.
No money.
Nope.
But it
Not a nickel.
promoted that it was good.
Yeah.
And I took pictures at every one of those events.
I know.
There are still collages of this stuff. Work I'm proud of.
Yeah.
But it's not something most people go, Martin takes pictures?
No, you're right.
Because, and this is where I want to come with this, which is two different spaces. Number one, you were really honest about the need.
Mm-hmm.
In this project, we need this.
Right.
And you put it out to the world and let
Right.
the world come back to you.
Sure.
And with those 100 volunteers at any given point in time,
Mhm.
nobody had money, but that doesn't mean you're not paid. And what I mean by that is you can be paid in kindness,
Mhm.
you can be paid in contribution,
Mhm.
you can be paid in community and what you're doing. And you had a really great way of tapping into I'm going to call it this. And I'm going to come back to Star Wars. It was a vision.
Yeah.
When most people, when Lucas, when he tried to shop Star Wars around, was turned down by almost every major company,
Mm.
and he had to get an artist to actually draw out some because nobody could see it. It was just too big and too crazy. And honestly, the first time you pitched what we were going to do, I thought, "Is this insane? Like, what's going to happen
Yes.
here?" Because it was insane. Like, if you think back to it and you've never been part of it, it sounded insane.
Mhm.
But you knew the vision clearly and then did the most important thing for me, which was you inspired.
Mhm.
Because I wasn't just inspired to be there, the whole team was inspired to be there.
Mhm.
So maybe take a little bit and talk about vision and inspiration because you cornered those even with like naturally you cornered those and then you learned that that's the you went to school basically to learn what you were doing.
Yeah. No, you're very right. That's the reverse engineering part, right? But I think if there's one thing that my feistiness has always been prepared to show up for, it's for passion. And I've always been incredibly passionate about well the things that interest me. And I think in those days, and certainly in that situation, what was I interested in? I was interested in creating an environment where people would in the environment feel inspired. They would actually feel inspired, not just to be in the room, but that there would be things going on in the room that would tickle them in, that sort of internal way of like, "Oh, that's cool. That's" and I was always really interested also in when people are gathered, do those people feel connection to one another? Um perhaps that's also why I was attracted to a religious environment at the time because the religious kind of world, for those that are, not familiar with it, is this is really a big part of what's happening, is that I think humans need to feel connected. This is a part of how we thrive and connected to one another. And how we do that is when we find like minded or similar minded individuals we then, as we build connection with them, we find identity. I personally believe that identity is intrinsic and it's in there, but it's funny how it's really hard to feel your own worth until you're connected to others who can reflect your worth back to you. And that connectedness really connects worth. So for me, this is something that from a very early age, saw and was always interested in creating. So I've been attracted to that juxtaposition of having fun, but with the idea that we're connecting. And I think it's also what makes me so incredibly interested in the species of humanity and how we relate to one another and what those relatedness opportunities create. Because I did spend most of my career not being an employer of people, but being an inspirer of people. And how do you inspire people? First and foremost, people need to know that they matter. They need to see that you value them, not just the hands and the feet that they provide and showing up and doing a job, that they uniquely, who they are, how they see the world, how they show up, that matters. And how do you show people that? You just do it. You look them in the eye and you say, "Are you open to considering doing this role?" And when they say, "Yeah, I think I could do that," you say, "You know what? I know you could do that." And that would be so incredible. And then after you've told them, "This is what I'm thinking," you back off and you let them, with their own autonomy, create systems that are gonna work for them in that moment. So case in point, let's just use you as an example. This is how I inspired you to take photos. I asked because we needed a photographer. So I put the ask out. When you responded with, "I used to do wedding photos," I immediately go, "Great, wonderful." Then we talked about specifics. You know, I gave you very little specific, but that was also because your enthusiasm to be willing means for me, I'm like, okay, then I, as a leader in that moment, if I want to inspire you to show up and to give your best, I'm not going to tell you what your best is. I'm going to let you show me what your best is. And I want to continue to just create an environment for you to Mr. Wedding Photographer to show up and give your gifts and skills. So there were some criteria. So, for instance, in that case, we wanted to build a slide deck that would be put to music that then would be able to be shown at the end of the event and then as a follow up to celebrate the event. But I didn't tell you any more than that. I just said, this is what we're hoping. How does that make you feel? And you were like, I'm on it. That was basically it. I remember a few times you coming up to me. And in full disclosure, you were a photographer for us for multiple events. But I'm thinking over the course of all those events, there were a few times, maybe not even once an event, where you would just check in with me. You'd be like, okay, so I just finished over here. I'm going to go over here. I'm going to take some shots over here. Anything else you need? And I would be like, yes or no. And then I would give you, but otherwise, I was hands off. And I'll tell you right now, when someone feels that their contribution is valued at that level, which means they're not being micromanaged, they're actually being encouraged to bring themselves to the task, and then they're being trusted to do it. And in addition to that, they are valued as a part of this whole kind of event. Their role is crucial to all of it working really well. That's how you get people to do something for free. And it's not manipulative. And, the opportunity I have, and I just have to say, as a volunteer coordinator and administrator in my career, I love to find ways to then bestow on individual volunteers gifts. So for instance, like, volunteers, you didn't have to pay to come to the event. And the event for some people, they had to buy.
Mhm.
Now, they didn't have to pay to come in, but they had to buy their food, right? They had to pay for the meal. So for volunteers, of course, no one that volunteered had to pay for a meal. Well, people say, well, that's basically paying someone to do work. I'm like, okay, it was like a $5-6 meal. Like, it's not payment, it's kindness. And it's also another way to show I see you, I value you, and I thank you. And it wasn't something that I was doing. It was just, I worked that into the budget. As I'm creating the big program and as I'm finding the resources, worked into the budget means volunteers are VIPs. Volunteers that show up and give their time and their talent for no money, they're VIPs. They are seen, they are heard, they are treated well. If volunteers come to me and tell me something is wrong, they get my full attention and I work with them to engineer a solution. A couple of times, I think even with you, you would come and say, hey, I noticed this is going on because you're great at like Hawkeye, watching and seeing and the kids and youth programs, particularly because you're highly skilled in working with kids and youth. And that was also something that we connected over. You were a great extra set of eyes. It had nothing to do with your photography, but you would come in and say, hey, I saw this. And immediately I'm like, can you go and handle that? Like, I would bestow in the moment
Yeah.
upon you more kind of, I was going to say power. It wasn't really power. It was just, can you go and give that oversight? Because I trusted that you,
Yeah.
first of all, you saw the issue. And generally this was like risk stuff, right? So you would be like, something's happening over there and the risk is increasing greatly. And I would be like, awesome. Can you go and de-escalate for me? And you'd be like, on it and done. Also, another way to inspire someone to give their gifts and skills. Now, did everything always work really well? No. Did every volunteer show up and do the job that I hoped? No. But I had to let that go as a leader. And this is the other thing. I think a lot of times, even when we're in an organization and we're paying staff, we expect them to do exactly what we told them. And then when they don't, we criticize and or we micromanage them. And I think the challenge with that is that it devalues their contribution. And even when their contribution might have been slightly askew, maybe I'm
Mhm.
not talking about breaking rules. I'm just talking about doing the process a bit different. If you as a leader can't let that go and look for an opportunity afterwards to just talk about it with them. And you end up devaluing their offering. And you know what? The only reason they're still there is because you pay them. Because being mistreated in a volunteer environment, you know what happens if I mistreat a volunteer? They walk,
Mhm.
and then I have no one. And as a volunteer administrator, what we learn very early on is no, inspiring and motivating and valuing and building connectedness, that's how we keep them. And it's not manipulative, it's genuine, it's authentic. And honestly, I want volunteers to walk out if they're being mistreated. Because if volunteers stay as they're being mistreated, you know what? You inform the organization that that behavior is acceptable. And it just isn't. I wish, and I mean this, I didn't think I would go on an HR rant, but I'm going to. I am so keenly frustrated with human resources in the traditional sense because human resources do not understand what I understand about motivating and inspiring humans. It doesn't matter whether you pay them or not. It has to do with, do they feel seen? Do they feel valued? Do they feel trusted? I would say, I'm going to boldly say, I think our friendship and our ability even to do this podcast together and our ongoing connection to one another is actually still the dividend of you having been seen, valued, and trusted by my volunteer leadership programming. And we're still getting the benefit of that today. I mean, it makes it sound like I'm awesome. I didn't mean to come off that way, but I just mean with an intention to do that. I think our relationship still is solid because that's how it started. And have I screwed up and do I make mistakes? Of course. But I think in general, it came from that's the point we started on. So boy, when you start there, it's really hard to you'd have to do disastrous things to ruin that because the trust was built right from the beginning.
Well, you started with the word power in one of the pieces where you said,
Mhm.
"Martin, I gave you the power."
Yeah.
So I just wanna come back to because I really felt empowered.
Yes.
And I wanna come back to empowered
Mhm.
because this is where I do absolutely agree with you,
Mhm.
that we figured out a way to empower each other then,
Mhm.
and we are still empowering each other today
True. And I
in
think
this conversation.
it's our default because
Mhm.
it's where we started.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Mhm.
even when we're out of alignment, we can still empower each other. And this has been a very powerful conversation. And so I wanna say thank you
You're
for the
welcome.
power of today. Um, certainly didn't see it 13 years ago.
We did not.
No,
No, and a lot has happened in
a
13
lot.
years, and not all of it's been fun or easy. Yet, project management for me has been a huge part of it, and like I said, I think also just this understanding of how do we see people
Yeah.
and work with them. Mhm.
And I wanna say thank you. Thank you for the inspiration then, and thank you for the inspiration today.
Thank you for taking pictures all those years ago.
All right. Thank you.